Good morning. My name is Dava Watson. I am with Kev Group, and this is Michael Hall. He's an account executive with Kev Group. I'm what they call a strategic education consultant. I've been in education finance for 17 years. Michael was with Chapel Hill ISD as a finance director. So we are from Kev Group. We help you manage your student activity funds. I am an auditor by trade, so this is kind of my bread and butter, is trying to help you mitigate that fraud and theft. Now, we're going to go ahead and start because I know we're running behind and y'all probably want to eat. So our agenda today is we're going to talk about tracking cash in schools. We're going to talk about the psychology of fraud. There is a psychology to it. We're going to talk about understanding the risks, implementing processes to help avoid those risks, implementing controls, and then we have a couple of success stories. So, this is, it's very odd. Let me see if I can bring that down a little. I'll do it from here. There we go. So when you look at activity funds, a lot of times you have millions of dollars in cash going through schools, especially in school districts. High schools will probably have the most money going through schools with fundraisers and tickets and, just fees, field trips. And so what happens is that money comes in through students. Hopefully it makes it to the school. If you're in the elementary school level, there's possibility that it gets spent somewhere else. It's handed to staff. The staff has to process it. And your teachers are that staff. They're the sponsors that are processing that funds before it gets to the bookkeeper. And guess what? They have jobs to do. They don't want to do that. They don't want to take care of all that cash, but they have to. And so it just creates millions of dollars of transactions. It creates multiple hands touching money, and it can get to be a problem. So what is the problem with cash? It's tempting. It leads to misappropriation. Skimming is easier when payments are made via cash, and when districts have manual procedures. And actually, there's other things. Okay, so this is not the right deck. So here's some examples of fraud. However, I've got some better examples. This is an actual student activity funds. This is fraud within districts, and these are headlines. But there was a headline a few years ago where a bookkeeper stole $250 million. $250,000, $250,000 over 3 years. Another one where a cheer coach stole $50,000 that was handed to her from parents, and she didn't turn in $4,500 of student revenue, advertising revenue. And then another one where a principal decided to take undeposited activity funds, receipted undeposited activity funds, and give them as bonuses to the staff. Now, that sounds generous, but that's not what those funds were supposed to go for, right? What are activity funds supposed to go for? They're supposed to go to the students. They're supposed to go to what they were raised for, right? They belong to the students. So while that sounds really,
it may be the one Dave is talking about, it may not, but in my hometown where I live, my wife's hometown, because that's where I live, this cheer coach, and I believe it's probably the same story, and I'm not going to tell you the town, but you can figure out if you know where I live. This tore the town apart. This literally tore the town and the school apart, and they never put that person's name in the headline. Whose name do they put in the headline?
The school.
The schools. The schools. It says so-and-so ISD. I'm not going to call anybody out here today, right? Clerk steals $250,000. And is that the clerk's fault? Or is it everybody that should have been watching all the way up to the superintendent? And the superintendent of this town was asked questions in public Sunday morning after church at the restaurant. Why did you let that happen? So and this was the gym teacher or the cheerleading coach for my kids. A very difficult situation, right? Sorry.
Okay. So there is a psychology to theft and fraud. I mean, people don't usually just wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to steal some money today. They're usually feeling pressure. There's a rationalization. There are people who decide, man, they're bringing in money and I'm handling it, so I should get a little fee. I actually had a sponsor tell me that once in an audit. That was my handling fee. I was like, that's not in policy anywhere. And you get a stipend for being that student council sponsor. So no, the opportunity, cash leads to opportunity. And then there's desperation. That bookkeeper that stole $250,000, it was desperation. And that was the one that broke my heart the most. She had a child who had cancer and she could not afford to put that child on her insurance. And she was a single mom. And so that was why she stole. Did it make it right? No, it did not. But you can see that psychology and what happens and why people do what they do. I hate to say it, you're going to probably see more if you have cash in your schools. 2008 was a big year for theft. Why? Because the economy tanked. The economy's tanked. And so it is a very large possibility that if you don't have policies and procedures in place, you have a lot of cash going through your schools, you're going to see more. So what are the typical risks for a school district? And let me get this going here. We want to understand the risk. So the certified fraud examiners, they put out what they call a report to the nations every 2 years. Now, I am happy to report that education has moved down in the industries that affect fraud the most, or fraud affects the most. It used to be number 6. So why is that? Because more and more school districts are getting cash out of schools. But as long as there's cash in your school going through hands, that risk is there. Now, you're never going to get all cash out of schools, and we know that. There are people who love to deal with cash. My 87-year-old father, when he died, had $1,500 in cash in his wallet. I almost had a heart attack. He would not use a credit card to save his life. There are those people out there, and it's just going to happen.
Let's go with the picture.
So the types of fraud. There's billing, there's corruption, there's skimming. In your schools, you deal more with skimming and billing. And so how can billing be one in the school district? We had a bookkeeper who decided to bill her PTA. So she would buy stuff and get reimbursed from the PTA. She would buy stuff for the school. The PTA usually bought or would, like, I don't know, they would come in and they would stock the refrigerators for the teachers. Teachers never even had to bring lunch. They would provide it. It was a very wealthy little elementary school. And so she would bill the PTA and say, oh, we were running low on this, so I went and bought it. And then the PTA would pay her. And no one blinked an eye. I blinked an eye when she showed up in a brand new Mercedes. Because I was like, she makes $13 an hour. And her husband's on disability. Where did that come from? Unless she came into a lot of money, inheritance or something, where did that come from? And so I started looking a little bit stronger. Now, most fraud is caught by tips. It's not caught by audits. External audits only catches 4% of fraud on your campuses. 4%. An internal audit will catch up to 16%. But the best way to catch fraud is people looking and people calling into a hotline or just, coming to the auditor and saying something's not right. So what are some fraud red flags? Do I have any auditors in the room at all? No? Okay. So do I have principals in the room? Okay. So one of the fraud red flags is multiple transfers between activity accounts. Kind of that robbing Peter to pay Paul thing. So I saw this happen. The band, football is king in Texas, but marching band is kind of number two, right? And so the band does tons of fundraisers. Why? Because they do all these competitions, and all those competitions are very expensive. So band's bringing in a lot of money from fundraisers. Bookkeeper takes some of that money, but when the band director comes to reconcile with that bookkeeper at the end of the month, which that should happen with every activity account, that sponsor should reconcile with the bookkeeper so they both agree what's in that account. She knew they weren't going to match, so she took money from orchestra and put it in band. And then when orchestra came, she took money from choir and put it in orchestra. She was really picking on the fine arts. And that was just, it was a constant. She was constantly transferring money so that she could run the report to show them, yep, this is your balance. Limited spending following fundraisers. We had a middle school who had a great coach. She would constantly do fundraisers. We did the cookie dough fundraiser every year. Raised thousands of dollars, refused to spend it. I'm like, I got to the school and I was like, why do you have $32,000 in your activity fund? Well, we're saving up for equipment. I said, no, you're buying equipment now. You need to buy that equipment now. But then when we dug deeper, she was taking all the coaches out to lunch. It was staff development. She was doing coaching retreats, staff development. Well, that comes out of a staff development account. That does not come out of the PE activity fund. Bookkeepers refusing to take time off. Now, I have gotten pushback on this one. But when a bookkeeper doesn't want somebody to look at their books and they don't want they don't want to have any backup, that's a red flag. I had a man come up to me at TASBO and go, I have taken 5 days off in 10 years. I said, nobody's looked at you? I was like, and why would you do that? This is a stressful job. You need to take some time off. Staff can't and won't answer questions. Your principals should know, they should sit down at least monthly with their bookkeepers and know what fundraisers are going on, what fundraisers are coming up, how the money is supposed to be spent. Matter of fact, they should have signed off on all of those fundraisers. They should have approved all of those fundraisers. And if they don't know why money is being collected, that's a red flag. Now, principals will completely trust their bookkeepers. I started my career in education finance as a high school bookkeeper. And I would put check requests in front of him because, back then we only wrote checks. I would put check requests or checks in front of him to sign, and he wouldn't even look at it. I was like, you need to look at those. There could be a $5,000 check in there for me to go shopping. He said, well, you better make it more than that to make it worth your while. It's like, okay, not the answer I needed. Late or incomplete reports. If your bookkeepers aren't reconciling at the end of the month and turning that in, they should be reconciling bank statements if you are decentralized. If you're centralized and they're not turning in the report so that you can reconcile the bank statement, those are big red flags. If they're having trouble or they're saying they need receipts, those are big red flags. And then that you never want it to get to the staff and parent complaints. I used to hate to walk onto a campus and it would be my child's campus, but because I worked for the school district, the first thing is the bookkeeper's not doing this. I don't know what I have in my account. And it's like, whoa, I'm here as a parent. Can I be a parent? This is my parent hat. Let me be here as a parent. But of course I had to go back and look. I couldn't just ignore it. So when staff or parents are complaining, that maybe that money's not going to where they said it was going to go to, or they haven't seen anything from that fundraiser, that's a big red flag. Okay. So we can reduce risk by implementing controls, and you want to have really good policies and procedures in place. Go ahead. So one of those policies and procedures is to make sure that every single member that handles activity funds has responsibilities written out and what their responsibilities are. There should never be a, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. I didn't know I was supposed to write receipts. I didn't know I was supposed to turn that money in at the end of the day. I had a high school teacher actually tell me that. She's like, well, I thought I could just turn it in at the end of the year. You know what was in her desk? $26,000. And nobody asked. Nobody said, not even the bookkeeper said, where's that money that you're raising for the fundraiser? She just assumed they didn't raise any money. I'm like, oh, okay. So bookkeepers need to be on the ball. They need to be following up with those teachers, making sure that daily deposits are happening. And if they're not, they need to go to the principal and be able to say, Mrs. Gonzalez did not turn in her money, or Coach Carey did not turn in his money, or he's not turning in money. Principals need to be aware, and they need to be following through as well. They need to not do a hands off and trust the bookkeeper completely. They need to be part of the solution. And then, of course, district leadership. If you have an internal audit, great. If you don't, I would suggest that you have a person in your district office that handles activity funds and can oversee all of that and be the bad guy. Go ahead. So preventing fraud, the bookkeeper's role, and these are just really basic. They need to deposit funds promptly and intact. We had an elementary school bookkeeper that just didn't like to go to the bank. And she passed away on the job. She passed away. The auditors found $80,000 in her vault. Nothing missing. She just didn't like to go to the bank. The good part of that was the next year we did implement couriers to come get the money, which is probably the safest way. Would you want to carry thousands of dollars to the bank on your own? So that honestly is the safest way to deal with that. Maintain accurate records and keep those records. That means receipts, receipt books, reports, bank reconciliations, all of that. And then submit those reports at least monthly to the district office. I am really surprised at how many school districts with activity funds will submit at the end of the year. The district office does not look at it at all throughout the year. Flag issues quickly. If it's kind of that, see something, say something, right? Fraud's caught by tips. If there's an issue, say something, ask questions. It's always okay to ask questions. And then reconcile monthly. And I don't mean just the bank statement. So like I said, football is king, band is second. They have huge accounts. That sponsor should be reconciling with that bookkeeper every month. Now, if it's a smaller account, like, I don't know, student council or something that doesn't have as many fundraisers, and maybe they can go every other month. But if they're raising lots of money, they need to reconcile monthly. Did you
Can I share just a second? Yes. On this issue of reconciling monthly, if this is the biggest indicator for me in a school district, is if I'm unable to account for that money in my monthly reconciliation process with my bank statement, all the bells and whistles are now going off for fraud. And it may not be that you're in a fraud situation. It may be that the online payment system that you've put in place is too hard to deal with in the reconciliation process. A very large school district, I will not tell you the name, I met with a couple of weeks ago. They have not reconciled their activity funds since September. And in discussions with them, they really didn't want it to go much further than the discussion at the level we were talking, because they didn't want it to be a known thing that they had not reconciled. A similar school district visit last week, a smaller school district. Oh, the bookkeepers handle all that. I never see their reconciliation reports. Do y'all know how far I jumped out of my chair when she said that? Hi. I mean, I take the money, I put it in the bank, I book it into my system, I do my reconciliation, and you never look at any of that. And if we don't have systems in place to prevent fraud, then when the moment comes for that person's integrity to be challenged about the ability to take money out of your till, out of our students' till, right? Then they're going to fail that integrity test, and we're going to fail our systems test. Sorry.
Okay. When you have bookkeepers who put off reconciling, many times it may be because they don't understand the reconciliation. So if they're doing that, they may not understand the bank reconciliation. Now, we all know bookkeepers don't make a lot of money. And right now, budgets are tight for every school district, period. And where's that money going? It's going to get teachers, because we're short teachers. So make it easier for them. You can't always pay them what they're worth. So make their job a little easier. So if that means if they don't understand the bank reconciliation, have a bank reconciliation lab where they can all come and get to understand it. Maybe once a year, maybe twice a year. When I knew I was getting old when I started training bookkeepers, and I had one sit down with me, and she said, "I don't understand what pay to the order of means." I said, "Huh?" I said, "You've never written a check?" She said, "No, I online bank." I was like, "You've never written one check? You didn't receive a check from your grandmother?" You know, it's just kind of like, everybody's got a check from grandma. You know, she was like, "No, I always got cash." I was like, "Okay, I'm officially old. I'm training people how to write a check."
Who
So,
knows
yeah.
where your checkbook actually is right now? Do you have a checkbook? Who has a checkbook on them? Okay, my name's Mike. Oh, not on you. And who has any real amount of cash on them right now? See, there's a little bit. I'm traveling, so I've got a little bit, right? But what an argument for not just getting the cash out of the classroom because of fraud, but because we don't carry cash anymore, and we don't write checks anymore. And so not only is it about fraud, but it's about convenience for your families as well.
Right. So the principal's role. A lot of principals will tell you, well, that belongs to the bookkeeper. I trust her. I hired her. I trust her. Now, in your districts, do your elementary bookkeepers serve a dual role? So they're kind of the school secretary, principal secretary, and they handle the activity accounts? Yeah, you couldn't pay me enough to do that. And they're the ones who work harder, in my opinion. And usually they're the ones that get paid less. So when principals hire that position, what are they hiring for? That's right, their right hand. That's who they're hiring for. So they're the ones that are going to hire those people that need to learn how to write a check usually. So they need to maintain knowledge of policies and procedures. I recommend that you make them go to activity fund training once a year. Principals hate it when I say that, but they need to know policies and procedures as well. They need to approve all those activity fund budgets. They need to approve all those activity fund fundraisers. They need to know what's coming in. And then they need to provide a safe place for funds. Now, a lot of schools have built-in vaults. Love that. Love it when a school has a built-in vault. If you don't have a built-in vault, you should get a locking safe in a locking closet somewhere. You would be surprised at how many schools just have cash in a drawer in the desk. And because they have a limit, like they don't have to go make a deposit until that hits $1,500, it just sits there in that desk till it hits $1,500. Well, I don't know about you, but I could do some damage at the mall with $1,500. I just could. So you want to make sure they have a really safe place to lock up those funds. They need to authorize transactions. And that authorization needs to be in writing or by email, but it does not need to be that deal in the hall. You know, Mr. Garza, can I spend this money? Sure, go ahead. And then nobody has record of it, because really every transaction that is made out of the fund should be approved before it is made. And then ensure compliance. He or she should know the rules well enough that he's able to ensure compliance of the rules.
If that money goes missing, and I didn't mean to do it. I put $1,500 in the desk and I kept it in there for 6 weeks. Real situation, my first day on the job as a finance director. Kindergarten teachers, $1,500 missing. It's not fraud. What is that? It's neglect. And who's responsible for that money? Are we gonna payroll deduct a bunch of kindergarten teachers? Oh, man.
Yes.
Oh,
So
man.
in our sponsor authorization, or sponsor responsibility statement, we actually said if money went missing due to neglect or a lack of following policy and procedures, they had to pay it back.
And does your school district have that policy? Ours did not. And so the kindergartner teachers got a pass because they had never been trained, never signed agreements with regard to cash handling. What do you think I did the whole next week? I put policies in place. I trained and I said, this is to protect you from any appearance that you've done something wrong. And then everybody got the word. Everybody knew they're watching. And then we went and audited at the campuses and everybody knew we were watching. But that's good. It's for your protection, right?
And then you want your principals to review all those reports monthly. Making them do that is difficult. I get that, but they need to review them monthly. So teachers, they need to be able to review. First of all, they're the sponsor of the account. They need to take training on activity funds every year as well. They need to approve any invoices. So they should see that invoice and then give it to the bookkeeper. If say it's a DJ, I can't tell you how many times I've walked into a campus and DJs are just paid under the table from the dance proceeds. That can happen. It does, but it shouldn't. They should submit funds daily. They shouldn't be being kept in their desk drawer. Even if that desk drawer locks. They should control the merchandise inventory. That should not be on the bookkeeper. They should control it. They should keep the inventory and they should report it. So if they've had a fundraiser and they're selling sweatshirts, the amount, if they've sold 400 sweatshirts for $10 a piece, they better turn in $4,000. And if they ordered 6, they still better have 200 left. And then enforce ticket control requirements and reporting. Tickets is where the bookkeeper that took $250,000, that's how she did it. Because most people just handed cash at the gate. And when the coach went to turn it in, he didn't have a report with it. He just turned it in and she was supposed to deposit it. And she deposited some of it, not all of it. That's why it took her 3 years to do it. But so you want to make sure that you have ticket control requirements, that report that says this is the ticket started 1, sold up this ticket $499 and they were $10 a piece. And so you should have $4,900. So the district responsibilities, you want to have training for everybody. And that puts a lot of responsibility on y'all, but it also protects you. If you have internal audits or an internal audit department, I would say at least every other year audit your campuses. And then coordinate external audits. Now, when your external auditors come in, they just usually do a balance sheet audit of your activity funds unless you ask them to do a deeper dive. And then actively engage other roles. Check up on them. Like I said, if you don't have an internal audit department, have someone in your district that's over activity funds. And then, of course, implement all the policies and procedures that you possibly can around that cash. In other words, one of my favorites is people just handing the bookkeeper cash. They don't count it. They don't have a deposit slip. They don't have an accounting for it. They just hand it to her. They don't know what's in that envelope. They're just handing cash. They should count it first, sign off that I'm handing you $500. She should sign off that, yes, you handed me $500 and deposit it as she got it.
All right, no judgment. Who's actually doing that full process every time money changes hands? Didn't think so. It just ends up on a desk to be counted later, doesn't it? That's an opportunity for fraud. And so you need a system that's not manual to manage that process, to speed it up, because they're not doing it because it takes too long.
No. I actually found right after it was right after the holidays, and I had to go audit a high school. And I went out there because of a tip. And actually it was one of those tips where the bookkeeper told her friend that she did something. The friend got mad at her and turned her in. It was that kind of tip. But what the bookkeeper had done was to pay for Christmas, she had taken cash out. And, they got paid at the end of the month. She had taken cash out. And then at the end of the month, she had written a check to replace it. So she borrowed, still stealing, but she borrowed. That's why we always make a big deal of money goes to the bank the way you received it. Now, does that mean if you allow your cheerleaders to do a lollipop fundraiser and they're 50 cents a piece, that you have to take all those quarters to the bank? It does. And they're a pain. That was I hated that fundraiser so much that when, there was a time in Texas when they said no more candy in schools. I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
The only thing worse is change collection. You drop the money in the buckets. Don't y'all hate those? I had an assistant principal write a check out of the campus bag
No.
for $600, borrow, and didn't realize that we were going to process that check in a timely fashion. And his wife had gone out shopping the day before and the check bounced. Now, I would have caught it eventually because the deposit would not have matched up when we went to do bank verification and posting. But then he bounced a check for $600. What does that look like to you? What does it look like? A career-ending mistake.
Yeah.
Right? And we gave him the opportunity, and he didn't realize he wasn't trying to steal. It's a mistake. But it took him some time to recover from that in the eyes of the leadership of the district.
All right. So implementing controls to prevent fraud. If you can have an integrated solution that helps you collect, manage, and track and reconcile funds, and not just online funds, but also gives you a digital footprint over that cash that comes in, that's where we kind of come in. And we've helped many districts in Texas do this. Go ahead. So one of the benefits, or many of the benefits, of adopting an integrated solution is standardizing reports. I'm shocked when I go into school districts and different schools are using different ways to handle their activity funds. Quicken is a big thing. People love to use Quicken to handle their activity funds.
Who's doing that? No judgment, no shame. QuickBooks, Quicken. Okay.
And then just reducing the amount of cash that moves through the school. Like I said, you're never going to get rid of all cash. It's just not a reality. And by law, you can't say we won't take cash because it's federal tender. You have to take it. Improving the visibility. When your bookkeepers know that you're watching and you're looking and that you have full view of what they're doing, they're a little less likely to take advantage of the system. And then automating those processes. Automating those processes helps them. When you take processes from being manual to automated, and you cut down steps, it helps their job so that their job is not as stressful, and maybe, they feel a little more poured into.
And I'll say this, every time cash changes hands, it's an opportunity for error and fraud. But every time cash or a transaction moves from one computer system to another computer system, especially if that's a manual process, it creates a whole nother opportunity for error or fraud. So if you just go and pick out a payment solution for online payments that is not integrated to your accounting software, you only just created one more step. And in many instances, a step that takes a really long time in your reconciliation process and creates an opportunity for somebody to do something wrong or purposely wrong.
Okay, so we're going to give you a couple of examples. Randolph Township, it's a small school district, only has 4,300 students, 6 schools, but they manage $800,000 that goes through just their activity fund annually. Go ahead. When we first went to them, they were doing everything cash. They wouldn't take checks. So that was $800,000 in cash that was going through their school district. Now they have $400,000 going in online. So we've cut that possibility of theft by 50%. They put all of their fees, their district fees and everything online. They have an 80% adoption rate for their parents. That means 80% of their parents are paying online. And that's what you want. You got to get buy-in from the parents, right? Now, I don't know about you. I have 3 boys, and I could give my son $20 to pay for his library fine because the boy lost more books and found more books than anybody on the planet. I don't know what happened to them, but that $20 usually went to 7-Eleven for donuts and Dr. Pepper and never made it to the school. So when I was able to pay his fines online, praise God, or when I give him money to take to the cafeteria even, right, to pay for his lunches. He bought food, but it wasn't for that.
And if your adoption rate is weak in this because it's too hard to use, the solution you have is too hard to use. If it's too hard to set up store items, your staff won't use it.
Right.
If it's too hard to reconcile, you're going to get tired of it and not promote it. And if your parents are not using it, then you're just going to revert back to your original system of paper payment, cash and check, and you're going to have spent time, effort, energy, and money on a solution that didn't work. And that's not what you want.
This is Klein ISD here in Texas. They have 50 schools. They have $13 million going through their activity fund every year. They have 54,000 students. So can you imagine 54,000 students bringing cash? They've collected $13.3 million online. They estimated that they're collecting over half of funds online now, which is reducing their risk of fraud by 50%. They have 33 parents using school cash, and they have an adoption rate of 71%. So again, that adoption rate with your parents, making it very easy for your parents to pay online is key.
And one of the items in your bags is a folder, and inside that folder is a case study on Klein ISD before they came to work with us working with them during and after. So that's a lot more words that tell you this exact same slide, but it's worth the read.
So we want to empower you to manage every dollar in your school district, online and that cash collection. We walk alongside with you, district, parents, staff. We are there from stem to stern, basically. So Kev Group was started almost 30 years ago. The name Kev, I always have to say this. It was started by 2 school bookkeepers who got tired of taking cash all the time and not having a way to track it. And it was Kim and Evelyn, and that's where Kev comes from. So they just, Evelyn literally taught herself how to code and wrote this program. So it is a female owned business, or started out as a female owned business. And they are still very much uh, involved in the business now.
If we work with you, you'll probably see Evelyn on a conference call.
Oh, yeah.
Sharing with you kind of some stories about things she's seen. And she really knows from your perspective how to fix
Mhm.
problems that you're going to encounter as you go, so that you don't have to encounter them, right? You don't have to suffer through it.
And I'm going to confess, in the workers' comp about the shoes, when we were talking about the shoes, Evelyn never wears anything lower than a 4-inch heel. I was like, oh, that's Evelyn. She's falling all the time. So we service over, that number is actually old. We service over almost 19,000 schools in North America now. We have $3 billion going through our system every year. We have 27 years of experience. This is something that I love. We have a 99% retention rate, customer retention rate, and we have 100% success story in implementations. We've never had a failed implementation. And then, of course, we have a 96% parent participation rate. So any questions? Any activity fund questions or?
Yeah, without.
No, so I'm not familiar with your product, but do you have something similar to Cash App? Because in the past month, I've been approached twice about using Cash App. We've denied it, but is there?
You mean like Venmo or?
Yes,
Or a mobile.
or mobile.
Or a mobile app.
So yes, so we don't have a mobile app, ours, but we are, what's the term I'm looking for? Mobile friendly?
You don't even need it. I mean, imagine when you go to make a payment, right? And you got to download an app all of a sudden. That's the end of it for me. I don't want to download.
We actually did a survey and people were like, we don't want another app. And so we're mobile friendly or mobile responsive. So once you pull it up, what actually happens is when the school puts a fee on for your child, you get an email and says, you know, John has owes $20 for this fundraiser. You just click on it and pay it.
Or as a QR code hanging
Yeah.
out somewhere, just take the camera, boom, you're right on the item, you're paid.
Right.
So you don't have to go through an app. And again, anything that's external, anything that's an add-on to your existing accounting system, you're going to have to balance and reconcile against your main account, right? So anything that you add as an external system for online payments, at the end, you're going to have to take a report of all online payments. You're going to have to break that down by activity, account, campus, et cetera. You're going to have to make entries into your accounting system. And you're going to have to do the same thing if you ever have to do a refund or have a bounce or whatever that is. So you really want an integrated solution that when the payment goes in the system, it's automatically putting that into your journal for the activity accounting software. And if there's a refund, it automatically does that. And again, ease of use. If it's not easy to use, is your staff going to use it? So we've stripped out a lot of the accounting type stuff on the front end so that this looks great and easy to use. The setup of store items is great. And I'll tell you something else, the parents, that 96% adoption rate is because it's easy to use for the parents.
So when he talks about we stripped out a lot of the accounting, what did I talk about earlier? Bookkeepers who come in and they're secretaries, they're admins, but they don't have a lot of bookkeeping experience. When I was I worked at Austin ISD. When I was at Austin ISD, before we actually went to KEV, we were using Business Plus to do our activity funds. Anytime a bookkeeper had to make a transfer in that system, they had to like send it to me first so I could approve it to make sure their debits and credits were going the right way. Otherwise, what happens? It's 2 more entries. So when we went to KEV, this is probably what sold me. I'm not going to lie, because we had 130 schools. That's 130 bookkeepers sending me transfers once a week. Yeah. So when we went to KEV and Evelyn showed the transfer and it said to and from, not debit and credit, I was like, sign us up. I don't want to see anything else. The other thing was bank reconciliations. They're a decentralized district. And so when they had to do bank reconciliations, we had 26 schools that would fail their audit yearly just on their bank reconciliations. Why? Because they didn't understand them. Because they were doing them manually. So when Kev came in and they could actually, it was literally click, 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 click off, what the deposits that cleared, click, 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 click the checks that cleared. Those 26 failures in 1 year went to 9 and the next year went to 4. So it was like, oh, because they got to have this visual picture and understand what they were doing. And so for me, that made my job easier. Matter of fact, at one point I asked Nicole Conley, am I going to have a job in the next couple of years? Because I don't think y'all need me anymore.
10 weeks ago, when I was employed by a school district, I'm new with Kev, but I'm in because it's a great product, right? 10 weeks ago, I had to talk one of my ladies in my office out of quitting because of a program we had got for online payments that comes through, and this is going to happen to you in Cash App. It's going to come through as all one big stack of stuff. And then if it batches up on days it lands, the date that you took payment is not the date it settles at the bank. So if you take payment on a number of items on the 28th, depending on which bank they're drawn on, which credit card they're drawn on, some are going to settle on the 29th, some are going to settle on 30th, some are going to settle on the 31st. There is no 32nd, but they're going to settle on the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, right? Well, you just crossed a month. So now when you go to reconcile, you've got this list of transactions contained in a $5,000 or $6,000 report, and you've got 18 transactions contained on your reconciliation report, and you have to play Plinko to add the numbers together to match the number on your reconciliation. So that's why we say an integrated accounting payments solution. The money comes in, it goes right in your book, and you don't have to play that game at the end of the month, as David explained. Check, 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 $13.99, $14.99, $15.99. It just matches. So you don't have to, if you never had to do that, trust me, that's why this is great.
So we could do a file upload into a sender, and we'd have to talk to our technology department about that. But you could also just keep it out on its own and not have to actually report it into a sender. There's 2 options there, but we can do a file upload into a sender.
Even the school districts that start with a transactional level.
Oh, sorry.
Even the schools that start with transactional level transfer into their ERP, into their business information system, most of them say we only have to do a line adjustment of our balance once a month, because the transactional data is now contained in the school cash accounting module, so that's the record. So when the auditor comes to audit, you're sharing reports from school cash accounting that are the record. Again, every time we go from one system to another system, we're prone to error and potential for fraud.
Actually, there's no limit on security accesses, and we can build different security accesses for you. So we can give your auditor access to it, to just like a read-only access. When auditors come in, that's why only 4% is found by, external auditor, and 15% is found by internal auditors, because they only take a sampling, right? They usually take 10 to 15% of transactions and look at them. So they could actually have it and go in and look at deep dive if you want them to. So I do have one more story to tell. He mentioned refunds. So back in 2014, well, not unlike today, it seems like we were having more freezes, but back in 2014, we had like 6 snow days in Austin. Unheard of, never happened. And the state actually forgave us and didn't make us make them up, thank God, because we only wrote in 2 days because they never happened. However, it happened in December. And in December, every elementary school kid in Austin, what do? They go to see the Nutcracker. Well, guess what? It was canceled because of those snow days. So guess how many refunds had to go out? Thousands of refunds had to go out. Those who didn't put them online had to write checks. Those who did put them online had to click refund, 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 refund all. And that was it. That was amazing. So, and then after that happened, everybody started putting stuff online. It was like, there's a reason for this. So COVID, yeah.
We had to come in during COVID to do refunds from activity funds.
Yep.
And I'll share one other thing about this. If you're taking payments online from a provider that's not integrated with your accounting solution, you're only likely doing that depositing or that truing up on a monthly basis because it's too cumbersome to do every day because you're waiting around for things to settle. And the problem with that is, let's say that field trip is on the 22nd and they've been collecting money online up through the 15th or so. It was due by the 15th. And your process says you only post that at the end of the month. How do they pay? Because they don't have a balance there. So if it posts automatically to your accounting system, it's immediately available in their balance for their activity account. So this is a challenge you face when we try to get the cash out of the schools and go find a cash solution. I can't tell you, the culinary arts teacher, can I do Venmo? No, right? That's our answer. No. Well, I have to take payment somehow. Okay, let me find a way for you, right?
Any other questions? Because I know y'all want to eat.
Hey, listen, I'm standing between you and lunch for just a second. Thank you for your attention. We're so glad to have been here today to share with you about fraud, but also about online payments. You have my card and you have a really great packet of information. I will give each and every person in this room 30 minutes of my time to talk about your school district and what's going on in it and how School Cash Online might help. Or if you just want to talk about life, then I used to pastor a church. I'll talk to you about life, okay? But if you want to talk about payments or you want to talk about fraud or you want to talk about cash handling, you've got my card. It's got my cell phone number on it. And I may not give you 30 minutes right then. I may give you 30 minutes a time in my schedule, right? Email me and say, hey, man, I want to talk. And I'll set you up a 30-minute appointment. We'll talk. If I'm in the neighborhood, I'll come by. And if not, we can do the Zoom thing, right? Thank y'all so much.